Good morning. Phil, am I live? All right. Welcome to the beautiful Archer Auditorium. On behalf of Ashland City Schools and our board president, Mr. John T. Van, it is our honor and privilege to have all of you here today for a special presentation. I want to thank the staff of Ashland High School, the student body of Ashland High School. You did a great job getting down here. We appreciate you very much. You work hard every day, and it is a special day to have an alumni back here to speak. A special welcome to the students and staff of Mapleton High School, Hillsdale High School, and Crestview High School. We appreciate you being here today. We have a great presentation prepared for you. Today, this would not be possible without the great work of a committee of individuals that are sitting in the back. I don't need everybody to turn around, but I would like to thank Mr. Greg Gorell, Mr. Bob DeSano, Ms. Zan Shar, Mr. Lonnie Miller, and Mr. Carl Reichert for your organization, your efforts, and your passion in bringing our presenter here today and your service to this great country. Can we give those individuals a round of applause? I would like to thank the administrative team and our maintenance staff and director of operations here at Ashland High School for putting this on today. We do a lot of things here in Archer, but to get this organized this evening, I want to thank Mrs. McKibben and Colleen Horde for today's luncheon that we'll be a part of. And any of our other guests that are here today, we are so proud of this venue, but more than anything, we are proud of the efforts that you put in as students. You have an opportunity today to hear from a special individual that sat in your seat many years ago, and I won't mention how many years ago, but he was just like you. He sat in a seat and listened to individuals that were great leaders, great human beings, in significant parts of the society that we live in, sat here just like you. We hope this motivates you today. We hope you pick something up that you can take into your life and make this great country that we live in even better. At this time, because of the very nature of the presentation, we would like to honor any of those individuals in this room that have served in the military, are interested in serving in the military, or have committed to serving in the military. If you would stand at this time, we would appreciate it. If you've served, if you have an intent to serve, or you're thinking about it, could we give these individuals a round of applause? Thank you for making the ultimate sacrifice for this great country. We truly do look forward to our speaker today, but as we start the festivities, I would like to introduce two wonderful juniors here at Ashland High School that will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I'd like to welcome Junior Karina Amin and Junior Aaron Dobek to the stage.
And now, please join us and stand to say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Ladies, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Ladies, thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to invite to the stage one of our seniors from Ashland High School, Mr. Aiden Bryant. Aiden will attend the University of Northwest Ohio next year, and he will major in automotive high-performance technology. It is my honor to ask Aiden Bryant to come to the stage to introduce our speaker for today.
Fellow students, Our special guest today is retired United States Marine Corps Colonel Robert Bob Springer. Bob grew up here in Ashland and graduated from Ashland High School in 1960. He received a commission in the United States Marine Corps following his graduation from the Annapolis Naval Academy in 1964. He is also a graduate of the United States Navy Postgraduate School. He is both a former astronaut serving on the 1989 Space Shuttle Discovery and the 1990 Space Shuttle Atlantis, as well as what brings him here today, a two-tour Vietnam veteran. During his 2 tours in Vietnam, he flew over 300 combat missions in the F-4 Phantom fighter jet. In addition to over 250 combat missions in O-1 Bird Dog spotter planes and the UH-1 Huey helicopters. While in Vietnam, Colonel Springer, a highly decorated Vietnam veteran, was a recipient of numerous medals and commendations. He earned the Navy Distinguished Flying Cross on February 4th, 1968, when his exceptional aeronautic skill allowed him to successfully assist with an air attack to facilitate the rescue of a U.S. platoon-sized patrol unit on the ground. While operating his F-4 Phantom, he was able to accomplish this despite an extremely low cloud layer, which caused poor visibility. Colonel Springer has numerous other education credentials and military training experiences, including graduating from the Navy Flight Weapons School, now referred to as Top Gun. By the time Colonel Springer had retired, he had logged 237 hours in space, 4,500 hours of flying time, including 3,500 hours in jet aircraft. Please join me in welcoming one of our own, a 2-tour Vietnam veteran, retired Colonel Robert Springer.
Wow. Well, thank you very much, and again, thank you for being here. It's an honor to be able to come back and talk to you a little bit about something besides space, as it turns out, for a change. So, for those that might have been here last year, I came in and talked about the space program, and I certainly enjoy doing that. It's more in my comfort zone, too, and I've got to admit, in terms of what I'm going to talk about. What we're going to talk about this morning, maybe not so much in my comfort zone, just because of the situation that surrounded it. But we're going to touch on a variety of different things. I do have to thank the local folks who put together the poster, and it kind of captures what I had talked about last year when I was here, and was looking at opportunities and seizing the moment, and I'm going to leave you with that again today as we go through this little bit of time together, because the opportunities are out there. And one of the things that I have always appreciated is growing up in a small town like Ashland. Just out of curiosity, how many of you wish you were in a bigger city or someplace besides little old Ashland, Ohio? I mean, yeah, okay. Well, the rest of you, congratulations. No, I'm not putting anybody down for that. But there's some really, really interesting things that come about growing up in a small town. Some of them good, and depending on your background, some of them not so good. I know as I was going through high school, my mother actually worked in a pharmacy in downtown Ashland, and she knew everybody, and everybody knew her. And I'll tell you what, if I stepped out of line one little bit, it got to her before I got home. And that's one of the things about the small town. People kind of keep track of one another, but they help you along the way, too. Interesting story. I'm going to mention a book written by Tom Brokaw called The Greatest Generation. Has anybody read that book? Wow, okay. It's a little bit dated, perhaps, and it really deals with World War II. And it illustrates a bit of the point that I just mentioned about growing up in a small town. The Greatest Generation, that was the people who were in the military in World War II. So it would be your grandparents, perhaps, or great-grandparents even, who might have been part of that greatest generation. Why the greatest generation? Well, we actually had a world war, unlike Vietnam and some of the other conflicts we've been involved in. The world was at war, and it was a very, very difficult time. tremendous number of people from the around the world served in being able to establish continue our democracy in the form that it is now, and that's a tribute to the many lives that were lost during World War II. As part of the book, though, Tom Brokaw has done some research into people who were out in battlefield and were called upon to do a really high priority mission, something that just had to be done. You could not fail in the mission. And one of the things he found out about it is that a vast number, over 75 to 80% of the people who were selected for those really high priority missions, the kind of, you need to go out and capture this, or you need to capture a German soldier, or whatever the mission was, some very high percentage of the people who were selected that were from small towns. And he did his research. He did find out a little bit more about it, and it's some of the things I've already alluded to. You know, when you grow up in a small town, and by the way, Ashland was about the sixth small town. When I moved here at the end of sixth grade, that was my sixth move in as many years, and so I had quite a bit of experience growing up in a small town and then finishing high school here in Ashland. But again, getting a real true sense of responsibility, and it's one of the things that I think is very, very important. And contemplate that as you're finishing out your years in high school, and if you're going on to college or whatever, the advantages that you have, and the fact that you do bring a little bit more to the table because of that environment that you've grown up in, where people feel like they can trust you, you're responsible for doing things. And again, as illustrated in the book, and I have found that to be true among my contemporaries, both in the military as well at NASA. So when I was here last time, I did kind of leave you with a little bit of a thought about searching out new opportunities and looking for things along the way. There was no way when I graduated from high school that I knew that I was going to be going to the Naval Academy. It's almost hate to tell this story a bit, because I just diddled around a bit too long. In my senior year in high school, how many seniors do we have here, by the way? Okay, and you all have, do you have college plans? Okay, when did you start doing those plans? When did you start putting that together? Anyway, in my class, the crowd that I ran in, a lot of those folks were really invested in whatever college they're going to early in their senior year in high school. Well, I had one or two scholarships, and I knew I needed a scholarship. My family was not wealthy, and that I needed some help in getting to a college. And somebody has suggested, well, you might try the Navy ROTC. So I did that, applied to the ROTC, and in the interview process, the Navy officer that I was talking to said, well, do you think you'd be interested in a career in the Navy? Well, here's where I stretched the truth a little bit. I figured out that the answer was, yes, sir, I'm really interested in a career in the Navy. I'm trying to get a Navy scholarship. I'm obviously interested. Truth of the matter is I didn't know anything about it. I didn't have anybody in my family that had ever been in the military at all. But I thought it was an appropriate answer. And he said at the end of the interview, well, do you think you might be interested in going to the Naval Academy? Well, yes, sir. And he said, well, maybe you can go to college for a year and then apply at the end of the year and get into the academy. Well, that's a plan. I'm not sure I wanted to spend an extra year in school, but it seemed like a reasonable plan. About 2 days later, my telephone rang at the house, and it was our local congressman. And he said, hey, I hear that you're interested in going to the Naval Academy. How did he know that? To this day, I don't know how he figured that out. Who had talked to him? I can't imagine how that connection took place, but I said, yes, sir. And he said, well, this is after Christmas of my senior year. And he said, I do a competitive evaluation. I have a really good candidate from the Akron area that I'm promoting. He's got really good grades and a good student and all that. And there's one more opportunity left out there, left for you to take the SAT test. He said, in fact, he said, I'm not even sure, because we're so close to the deadline, I'm not sure you can even get in. So I made a try at it, and I said, that's fine, I'll do it. I had to drive over to Worcester to take the test. My permission to take the test did not arrive until that morning when I got there. A telegram actually showed up. I still have a copy of the telegram that authorized me to take the test. Well, as it turns out, I did well on the test. I actually got his appointment to the Naval Academy, and that's how I ended up going down that street. So an interesting challenge to it, and it's part of the reason that I do say keep your eyes open. Opportunities are funny. You never know when you're going to, something really different is going to happen in your life that will change all that. Went to the Naval Academy, decided to further my career by going into the Marine Corps. I joke about it a little bit. I like the uniforms better, but actually I just, some of the things I had learned at the Naval Academy about leadership and taking care of the people that work for you and all that really were interesting to me, and I wanted to go ahead and continue, and I thought that going into the Marine Corps was the best thing for that. Actually wanted to be an infantry platoon leader, a infantry officer. I did that. I went to the basic school at Quantico and finished about a 6-month course and was assigned a platoon. But Vietnam was heating up at that point in time, and they said if you really want to do an aviation option, now's the time. So I dropped my rifle platoon and went into the naval aircraft training business, and it was a real change of pace. Moved around a lot, but again, an opportunity, and I wanted, these things have happened all through my life and my career, is to have opportunities like this come along. And one of the things I hope you will take away from this is you have to be aware of that. You need to have, sometimes I even use the term situational awareness. Anybody heard that term bandied about? It's not quite psychobabble, it's close, but it is an interesting term that I like to keep in mind, knowing what's going on around you and being able to, as incidents happen in your life that would drive you in one direction or another, go ahead and take care of that. So got through flight training, and this is where, and something I will speak to the veterans about tomorrow night at the dinner. And that's really why I'm in town today. It's a great opportunity to come and talk to the high school classes again. But I'm really here. As it turns out, this is the 50th anniversary of the end of the conflict in Vietnam, where the last of the troops came home from Vietnam. And we, as you already know, we have some Vietnam veterans with us in the crowd this morning. Thank you, folks, for being here. It's really an honor to be part of that organization. And to be able to share some of the memories and the lessons learned, and I'm sure each one of those individuals would have stories to tell about their association with it. So I finished flight training, and one of the differences that I have to look back at, and I'll be interested to talk to some more of the veterans and to find out what their background was as they either graduated from high school, perhaps graduated from college, and went into the military. Because in a lot of cases, particularly for the folks that were drafted, some were, some weren't, some volunteered or completed other programs like I did at the Naval Academy, but went to Vietnam in a relatively short order. And I think the worst case, I actually had some young men who worked for me in Vietnam, where they had graduated from high school, got caught in the draft, and literally about 6 months after they graduated from high school, they were in combat in Vietnam. And I always, that struck me as being a tough change. If you can put yourselves in that position, to go from the seat you're in now, and at the end of next summer, you're on a battlefield someplace. And what an incredible change that can take place. And some people had more trouble dealing with it than I do. Again, I was fortunate in that between 4 years of military school at the Naval Academy, 6 months of training for basic school in the Marine Corps, and then entered 18 months of flight training before I had to go to Vietnam. So I went through flight training, finished getting my wings. It's a rather striking picture there. This was not going into combat. That was just the gear that we wore during the training sessions. But I did finish all that up, got through my first squadron, and again, took advantage of some opportunities. Someplace along the line, it was a fairly new squadron, and we were getting ready to go aboard the aircraft carrier and land the airplanes on board the aircraft carrier. And if you've ever seen any movies about that, you have somebody called the landing signal officer. If you see a World War II movie and you see a guy on the back of the aircraft carrier and he's got paddles in his each hand, and that helps. So as the airplane is coming into land, if your left wing's low, he'll kind of raise the left paddle, and if he doesn't want you to land, he'll wave you off. Anyway, very important job, and I started training in that. And as it turns out, the guy that I was training with was in a car accident, and very early on in my career, I ended up with a ton of responsibility. I was the squadron landing signal officer as we were trained to go aboard the carrier. Had both a good and a bad effect on me. I had a lot of work, spent a lot of hours standing on the back of an aircraft carrier doing that kind of, we don't use flags anymore, by the way, we do it electronically, but still a big effort. But what the benefit of it for me was that instead of spending 6 months in my squadron and then going over to Vietnam, I spent about a year in the squadron. So it was, again, an opportunity to become a bit more mature, take on a bit more responsibility, and a great opportunity, again, to be able to get that additional experience. Got over into Vietnam and was assigned to a squadron. Actually landed in Da Nang, one of the major cities in the central part of Vietnam. Got off the airplane with a whole bunch of other Marines and pilots, and they went through the list and called off the names, and they said, okay, you're going to get on the bus, and tomorrow morning you'll go to the admin section, and they'll assign you to your squadron. And they said, Lieutenant Springer? Yes, sir? Get on that helicopter, you're going to Chu Lai. Where's Chu Lai? Well, it was about 150 miles south of there, and considerably more remote. Why Chu Lai? Well, as it turns out, the commanding officer that I had in my first squadron was now a commanding officer in Vietnam, and he had selected me out of a list of people, and he had done that with a few others as well. So he had built kind of a good squadron. Flying the F-4, you can see my favorite airplane, got a couple thousand hours in that airplane. You can see it there. Actually, this is a Vietnam vintage, and our squadron, it was called the Silver Eagles. You can see the incredible amount of weaponry and all that was on that airplane. So did that for the first 6 months of my time in Vietnam. Ended up flying about 300 combat missions at that point in time. And I'll just mention this in passing. Why did you fly so many missions? And the reason why is I really recognize the importance of what we were doing, particularly in the Marine Corps, because in the Marine Corps, your job as a pilot, everybody is focused on the rifleman in the field. And your job, no matter what you're doing, whether you're a supply officer, an aviator, whatever, your job is to support those troops in the field in whatever way you're called upon to do. And I always felt like, if I was capable of flying the airplane, and it turns out, and this is not bragging, but I was a better than average pilot. If I had the skill set that it took to go ahead and fly those kinds of missions and perhaps save somebody else's life, because I was put in the position, I had the opportunity to be out there and fly a critical mission. During the introduction, Aiden, who did a very nice job of that introduction, by the way. Thank you again, Aiden. The mission into Khe Sanh was one that one could never forget. We had, myself and a wingman had taken off out of Chu Lai, flew a couple hundred miles up, and Khe Sanh, in that period of time in Vietnam, was the real hot spot. A regiment of Marines was basically isolated on top of a mountaintop. They were surrounded by a good part of not just the Viet Cong, but the North Vietnamese Army, and they were constantly being shelled. A lot of killed and wounded on a regular basis up there. And on this particular day, they had sent a platoon out to reconnoiter some enemy positions, and they had gotten ambushed by an even larger North Vietnamese Army detachment. And they really needed close air support coming in, dropping that kind of ordnance that you see on the airplane, and be able to suppress the fire so we could get a rescue helicopter in and pull those trips out. Well, as it turns out, by the time we got on station, they'd had 3 or 4 flights, and the cloud cover was so bad that they could not penetrate. So you fly into a mountainous area, and the clouds are settling down, so you cannot see the peaks of the mountain. So you can't actually let your airplane down you're likely to fly into one of those concrete or iron mountains out there. And so they were really asking us for help, but because of the weather, they realized that we couldn't get in. And I realized that some days earlier, I had been in that area and I had approached from a different direction, and I was able, I kind of remembered from the map and all that, that there were some valleys that you could come up. Now we're flying about 50 to 100 feet over the treetops, and we did that, got into the area, located the group that was under attack, and were able to suppress the fire and actually extract the Marines. So save some American lives by doing that. So, and again, that was the motivation for me to keep flying and to fly as many missions as I did. Not all my missions were quite that exciting. Well, there were some that were equally as exciting, and but not quite as successful in such a way. If you can see the picture under the belly of this airplane, there's some kind of silver tanks. Those actually contain napalm. Napalm bombs. It's like a jellied gasoline, and well, we would use that deep in the jungle. So we had a mission where I was carrying a load of bombs. The other airplane was carrying a load of napalm, and this was when I was still fairly new in country, and they wanted to break me in gently to the combat fire and all that. And so I was the wingman on this flight, and my leader, who had all regular iron bombs, said, here's what I'm going to do, or he had the napalm, excuse me, and he said, I'm going to come in and I'll drop the napalm, and you be right behind me as we attack those positions, and my bombs will kind of keep the heads down so they won't be shooting at you, give you a higher chance of survival. I said, well, that's fine, but I've heard a story that if you drop napalm, because one of the things that napalm, because it burns very intensely for a short period of time, it literally sucks the oxygen out of the air. And I said, well, is that true? And he says, well, yeah, but he says, don't worry, we'll drop I'll drop one bomb at a time. That won't a big enough explosion to damage your aircraft. I said, well, okay, that sounded like it would work. So we did it. We made our first pass, and I was right behind him. He dropped his napalm, and I dropped my bombs, and that worked out. Came around again for the second pass, and again, I'm right behind him, flying down, and he dropped all the rest of his napalm in one giant mistake, and it was a huge explosion, enough that when I flew through that napalm cloud, there was literally no oxygen available. My jet engines both flamed out on that airplane, and so there I am, 150 miles inside enemy lines, a very, very nasty part of where the fighting was going on. Traveling about 400 miles per hour with 2 dead engines. And fortunately, I was able to follow the emergency procedures, get up to a little bit of a, sort of coast up to a little bit of an altitude where we could get some clear air and get those engines started and continue the mission. So a bit of a harrowing experience that certainly I guess I could look at as an opportunity. The opportunity is I got a chance to go back and do it again. Someplace along the line, while all that was going on, I think primarily because I had flown so many combat missions. At this time in Vietnam, in the squadron like mine, if you flew 125 or so missions in a year, that was considered a big number. 6 months, I'd already flown 300. So they decided to get me out of that rotation, and I got assigned as the United States Marine Corps advisor to the Korean Marine Corps in Vietnam. So the pictures that you see up there now, I'm out way out in the jungle, no electricity, no running water, and life was tough. And doing support missions with the Republic of Korean Marines as our partners and all that. So spent a few times on the ground, and again, an interesting opportunity because it gave me a whole different picture of what the war in Vietnam was like. Seeing it from 350, 400 miles per hour from a jet is different than walking the rice paddies and getting shot at on a regular basis. Also during that same time, I had a chance to fly some different airplanes. I talked a little bit about opportunities. This was one that popped into my view, not only with the O-1 Bird Dog, which is an observation airplane, but the Huey helicopter. So we were, by air, we're only about 30 minutes from the helicopter base. And some of the Marines who were flying helicopters were guys that I had gone through flight school with. And I asked them if they had an empty seat, could I go ahead and like fly co-pilot? Now, I wasn't actually qualified to fly helicopters, but they would pick me up, and it was good to have somebody along that. I know what the purpose of that was. That if the pilot got shot in a desperation, I might be able to land the helicopter. Well, after a couple of those flights, the guys I was flying with said, "Hey, do you want to go ahead and learn how to fly it?" And I said, "Sure, I'll do that." So over the course of the next couple of months, when I had, I'll call it spare time of flying the helicopter, I actually got qualified to fly helicopters in Vietnam. Fast forward a couple of years after Vietnam, and I'm being assigned, and I actually get reassigned to a helicopter squadron. Now, as it turns out, though, I got picked up about 200 hours in helicopters in Vietnam, but none of that showed up in my record books. So I was assigned to a helicopter squadron, and they said, "Well, we're going to have to send you back to Pensacola to retrain in a helicopter." Well, I didn't want to give away my little advantage that I had there, so without telling them that I had 200 hours in helicopter and was actually qualified, I said, "Why don't you just give me an instructor pilot, and we'll go out and we'll see how you do." Of course, we went out, and about 5 minutes after, it's like riding a bicycle. You're back in the cycle of things, and everything was working out. And the instructor came back, and he says, "You won't believe it, but for a jet pilot, this guy is the most fantastic helicopter pilot I've ever seen." Again, the opportunity of getting that experience in combat and bringing it back. Don't want to overdo the opportunity side of it, but again, keeping your options open. Had a chance to go through the Navy Fighter Weapons School out at Miramar. Both movies got it pretty well. We have no Mach 10 airplane, no matter what Maverick said, but it was a good opportunity to enhance my skills in that set, as well as getting some really exciting flying time. Following that, I had a chance to get selected for the Navy Test Pilot School. Went back to my friendly Phantom aircraft that I had flown for so many missions in combat, and got to fly that same airplane in a test flying environment, which is a very, very demanding environment with a lot of risk involved in it. So I've had a pretty full lifetime of things, but again, taking advantage of, and you never know when these things are going to come along, the opportunities that present themselves. One more short story about it. I was in a short period of time where I wasn't flying. I was in a desk job, and I had some special projects that I was working on in the Marine Corps, and in the organization that I was in, my boss, who was a full colonel, would have been going to the general's luncheon once every month. And this particular month, he had a commitment, and he asked me to go and represent our organization at the commanding general's luncheon. And I said, "Fine." He said, "What do I have to do?" He says, "Just go have lunch and be polite and don't embarrass anybody." I said, "Okay, that's good advice." So I went to the luncheon, and I scarcely knew the commanding general, as it turns out. I was still a fairly low-ranking officer, but we sat down, had the luncheon, and the general got up to give his remarks, and he said, "Well, before we get going for today, I'd like to introduce one of our young officers who's involved in a very interesting program. Captain Springer, would you please stand up and tell this group of senior officers what's going on?" Holy gosh! I was just talking to somebody that was talking about public speaking. Well, so this was an introduction to public speaking 101. So fortunately, I was familiar with the project, and I was able to get up, give a short dissertation on what was going on in the program, and sat down and kept my mouth shut. Went back to my office. About an hour later, I get a call from the general's aide. He says, "The general wants to see you right away." I went, "Oh my gosh, I must have screwed up big time. What did I do wrong?" And so I hustled over to the general's office and got in, and he said, "Caught you by surprise, didn't I?" "Yes, sir, you did." He said, "Well, you handled it pretty well. I've got a new assignment for you. You're going to be my special assistant for operations," and sort of an instant promotion to, and again, with an opportunity that I never saw coming, but again, stepped up and had the confidence, if you will, to go ahead and do that. So a lot of different things in my life that have been challenging. I guess I hope, although I certainly wouldn't say that there's anything wrong with all of that's gone on. Some cases more challenges. than I like to. We never did get wounded in Vietnam, but just as kind of a footnote to that, for those of you, have you ever heard of Agent Orange? It was a defoliant that we used in Vietnam to kill vegetation, and if you got exposed to it, you were likely to develop some form of cancer. And so I'm burdened with that for the rest of my life, 2 different forms of cancer that I'm fighting. I refer to Agent Orange as a gift that keeps on giving from Vietnam. So good and bad from all that, but every single bit of it was challenging and exciting. And I think what I'll leave you with a quote from Theodore Roosevelt. I guess you can read it yourself, but the whole point of it is dare to do things. I hope that most of you in the audience would not go away from this in being one of those timid souls who walks in the semi-darkness and never knows the highs and lows. But certainly I've had a chance, and I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had and the chance to experience both sides of that equation, and I think I fulfill what Roosevelt was talking about, that I have had a wealth of experiences throughout my time in the military and as a follow-up in the business world as well. And it all comes because always looking for the opportunities, always taking a chance sometimes, not so much from a standpoint of personal risk, but certainly the risk that you can't worry about failing. You have to be able to overcome the challenges, and I hope that each of you, as you go forward, will kind of carry that with you, and we'll hear and see great things from this class that's graduating this year. With that, thank you very much, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. You have been a great audience today. At this time, we are going to stay put for just a few minutes as we let our honored guests and veterans exit out the back of Archer. So if you could just stay where you are for just a few minutes, and then we'll dismiss you here soon.